kid from the bush who grew into a legend in his own lunchtime, former SAS soldier Michael J. Malone has seen it all. This is Never Die Wondering, Mick Malone in his own words, hosted by the man himself, Mick Malone, along with Toby Malone, as they examine this long, storied career in the Australian Special Forces. Join us each week for behind-the-scenes insight, exclusive readings, and brutally honest truths from a true original. Welcome to Never Die Wondering. Welcome to episode 21 of Never Die Wondering, Mick Malone in his own words, a podcast that explores the life and legend of Michael John Malone, OAM. My name is Toby Malone, Mick's son and co-host of this podcast series, joined by the man whose name is in the title, Mick Malone. G'day, Dad.
Hey, Toby. How are you, mate?
Yeah, great. Yeah, I'm enjoying this process, getting to sort of get a little bit of insight and background into these stories that I know so well.
It's a bit of fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm quite astonished at how much you know.
It's pretty hard not to absorb a lot. I mean, there's a lot of people usually talking about this legend in his own lunchtime as I grew up. And then editing your books certainly helps. So yeah, I tend to retain a lot of stuff. So it's a good thing. I can only hope that my son knows as much about me when he's grown up. But
Oh, he will, mate.
maybe we'll see. So the last episode we talked a little bit about the first patrols, about the relief of getting in and being able to test out your skills without anyone firing a shot. And so we're going to be following on today with a shorter chapter that essentially couples up with the previous chapter about the first patrols, where we're getting a debrief and figuring out what the next steps are for your patrol after you got back. So, yeah, so you've got so it essentially just follows directly on and some of the procedure of what you do after a patrol. So once you've gone out, obviously there's a lot to do afterwards. There's a lot of got to tell people what you've seen, what you found. I guess it's a shorter process when nothing much has gone on than when you've got intel to bring back or you've captured weapons or.
The most important debrief was the patrol debrief amongst each other.
Right.
Giving someone a mouthful about watching his arc or,
Right.
making a noise or nighttime routine. We didn't worry too much about the debrief from up above because the boss did that, but and he talked tactics and the whole war thing. We didn't worry about that. We just worried about being humans in a patrol.
So when you had those debriefs amongst the patrol who'd been out, did you ever get into a situation where someone cracked up because they were criticised or they'd done something they shouldn't have done and someone called them out? Or were people open to...
That first patrol, one of the blokes was a complete prong.
Right.
He got moved on late, just a little bit laughed after that.
He's the bloke whose name you don't actually use in the book because you didn't want to...
No.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to have any rockets coming back at me. But he was a strange dude, and he was arguing with the boss over all sorts of shit. And there's a problem with some of these blokes. They think they know everything.
Right.
But he got moved on pretty quickly.
And then you would get, I guess you would get notes on your comms. The chooks give it to you over.
Oh yeah, they're always fun though. Oh, Malone, no comms, Malone. That's what they call me in New Guinea. But by the time I got to Vietnam, I was pretty good.
Right. Good. Excellent. Well, why don't we get into just reading about the debriefs? It's a very short chapter, as I said. So, but this gives us a good closing sense of what happened on those first patrols and what happens afterwards.
Yeah.
So today we'll be reading Chapter 18 of Two Ranks on the Road, 35 Years of Australian Special Forces Service by Michael J. Malone, OAM, published in 2024 by Imprimatur Books, Perth. This chapter, entitled Debrief and Resup, covers pages 147 to 150 in the print edition. The ebook may have slightly different numbering, so follow from the beginning of the chapter. As we read the body of the text we read by author Mick Malone, whenever we come across a footnote, we'll pause in the least disruptive way possible, and I will read the footnotes. And now, without further ado, Two Ranks on the Road.
Chapter 18, Debrief and Resup, 1969. Down she came. Suitably armed with a few coldies, we gathered in a corner, laid the patrol map out on the table, and proceeded to put the sequence of events together from infill to exfil. My trouser leg map was even added to the mix. It was a short debrief directed generally by the 2IC Pancho Querquez, because he was on his second combat tour and our PC had exactly the same experience as the rest of us baggy asses. As it was it was only a 5-day shakedown patrol and we hadn't come across any enemy activity. It was over very quickly. We finished our beers and headed back to the lines, and the PC headed down to the ops end to make his report. Weapons still had to be thoroughly cleaned in a bath of range fuel and oil and pulled through and inspected by Pancho. My M16 was fairly new when I got it, so it wasn't a hard job. Any dramas with our weapons were immediately attended to by excellent armourer Peter Schwartz, but I wasn't one of the ones who would visit him today. As it had been a patrol without incident, we were all pretty happy with our weapons. They'd only been fired on the range so far. On with our flying suits for a few cold ones before dinner, grab our esky 50 cal ammo tin, and head up to the boozer to have a couple before dinner and pick up 6 or 8 cans and a smattering of ice for the movies. There were quite a few faces missing from the dinner queue, as a lot of patrols had deployed just before we did, and some in the last day or so. The ever-present chooks were there, of course, giving us heaps on all sorts of things. Their glory moment came when they set up and showed the movie each night in Ocker's Opry House. As always, the inevitable happened. They put the wrong reels on purposely by accident, purely by accident. You understand? Sure, we said, knowing it was their mischievous nature to fuck the grunts around, always in good fun. Mooker Stanton kept the aggro down to a dull roar, and the chooks were our very good friends, still are to this day. We relied heavily on their ability to pick up our sometimes very sketchy Morse and get us out of the shit. They never had any patrols. They never let any patrols down. Second Lieutenant Peter Fitzpatrick was their troop commander and sat at the left hand of God number 3, the Beast. Peter did the same Carter course as me, the third of 67. Not sure he ever went out the bush, but many others did, such as John Gob Mounsey and Mick Cowboy Millington. These two came on patrol with us and were and there were others in other patrols and names lost to time. Dinner was a bit of the same old, and it was infinitely better than field rations. Tom Bassett and his team of Ted Slattery and Bob Stanley did the best with what they had, as the fresh ration truck came up the hill once a week with drums of frozen milk, cartons of eggs, and periodically bacon. We mainly lived on cereals and bread, which suited me coming from a boarding school environment. We had a few days before we would get another warning order. This time would be fully occupied working around the lines, range practices and mess duties. The Q store under Wotu Mizu Waters had everything we needed, but we had God's own trouble getting anything out of them. It was the same old problem army-wide. Sorry, only got one left. Cam clothing was a good case in point. Nah, sew 'em up, came the dulcet tone of the Q store overlord. Once Jim Phillips' J Troop commandeered a 3-ton truck. We only had one, and drove up to Long Bin, a vast American camp, and asked, "Where's your rubbish tip?" Once there, he and his work party proceeded to load bales of discarded camp clothing onto the truck and anything else they could find. They also found a crate containing a gross 144 K-bar knives, all in their grease, another crate of scabbards.
Footnote: the K-bar was a serious knife issued to Marine Corps Browning automatic rifle characters who couldn't fix a bayonet to their bar.
When they got back to the DAT, they stopped outside the mess and all of us in camp lined up to get a free K-bar. The remainder were given to the Q store along with the bales of camp clothing. Much of it, much of it was brand new, worn only once. When soldiers transited from their far-flung camps around Vietnam through Camp Alpha in Saigon, heading on R&R, they were stripped off all their uniforms and issued a new set. Invariably, most of the discarded cans were nearly new. Didn't matter, they were bundled up and discarded to the rubbish tip, where poor undersupplied Australian dumpsters divers, soldiers, retrieved them. No idea why the K-bars were discarded. I think the US Army had a policy that anything leaving the States for Vietnam, except for capital equipment, did not come back. Our supply chain was fairly rubbish in comparison, as it was before World War II and Korea. Lithgow still made our SLRs as they did with our 303s in World War II, Korea and Malaya. We had trained with the Bren LMG in Australia, but thankfully our Army made the right decision to buy the American belt-fed 7.62mm M60 machine gun to replace the magazine-fed Bren. This was a very effective weapon, especially for our infantry battalions. When the SLR was a big, heavy hitting weapon, many of us were able to get M16s. Whilst the SLR was a big, heavy hitting weapon, many of us were able to get M16s, some with XM148mm grenade launchers.
Footnote: XM stood for experimental model.
It wasn't long before the new M203 arrived to be widely distributed. We had two in our patrol, and they gave quite a leap in firepower for 5 men. I never carried one as it would have increased my pack load, given I was carrying a radio and spare batteries. Most patrols are armed with Claymore anti-personnel mines, M18A1, and various other pieces of kit depending on the job, such as a 60mm light anti-tank weapon, LAW, and demolition packs to destroy a bridge or bunker. The only patrol I was on where an M60 was carried was a bridge demolition job with the Kiwis. We acted as cut-off groups and protection parties, while the Kiwi troop laid homemade shaped charges made by the 7.62 ammo tins filled with explosive C4. The engineers cut the bottoms out of them with oxy and created a shaping. Um, when filled with C4, the inverted charge would blow right down through the bridge, through the target. Excuse me. They laid a ring main of det cord between the tins, ran a length of FBT
Footnote: fuse blasting time.
back to the firing point and lit the fuse, while the other end had a detonator in the C4. The whole thing took about 15 minutes from go to woe. By the time it was set to blow, a monsoon had set in, and down she came, both the bridge and the rain. We pulled back and headed back to our pickup LZ. We had to wait till the rain abated so the chopper could get into the LZ safely. Halfway through, half the patrol boarded the chopper and flew back to the DAT, while the Kiwis stayed on a recce mission. Many beers were consumed in the boozer that night, and great camaraderie ensued. End of chapter.
And that was chapter 18 from Two Ranks on the Road, 35 Years of Australian Special Forces Service by Michael J. Malone, as read by the author. Okay. So getting a bit more of a sense of life in Nui Dat and what was happening and the fact that you're not only there, but then you're in and out on patrol and you have to do all of these different things in between those. But you're still having fun. You're still having a beer. You're
Oh, yeah.
still,
No,
it's got
like
to,
I said, mate, the mates were everything.
well, it's got to be strange. It's got to be a strange thing to be standing in line for food and realizing that there are blokes who you saw last time who aren't here because they're out in the bush, and you hope they'll come
Yeah.
back.
Well, it was a bit of a game, a mess queue game. Who's not here?
Right.
Because you never told what other patrols are going at. Only because they didn't tell you. It
Mm.
wasn't a secret or anything. But
And did it ever get
they say, "Oh, Bill Bloggs is. Oh, he must be out in the bush."
right?
Um,
And did you ever get a chance to get used to this kind of life, or did it was it all you're always on your toes?
oh no, we got pretty used to it. We got fully convinced we were invincible.
Right.
Um, Charlie was never going to be a match to us. It
Mm.
went once the shooting started. We were convinced of that.
Right.
Um, it changed a bit when the shooting did start.
Mm.
5 cent, 10 cent happened a fair bit,
Yeah.
but we were pretty well trained. We were heavily trained for 2 years before we went there. Remember,
Hmm.
and but it's a different kettle of fish to do it live when you've got a bad guy with a gun trying to kill you, and you're trying to stay alive and kill him.
Right.
Uh, but it was what it was.
Yeah, that's right. And then the last story you talk about the bridge demolition job with the Kiwis.
Yeah, there was a bridge of about seven big, huge tree trunks across a creek, which was important to blow because the bad guys are using it as a resupply route.
Hmm.
And the Kiwis got the engineers to build them these shaped charges with the bottoms are shaped like that
Hmm.
and filled them full of C4, which is an American explosive, and carted them in. They had about 10 of these things and they laid them in a ring main across the bridge and whoompa, up she went. Oh my God. Absolutely pouring down when they blew it. So it was a sort of weird this curtain of rain and this huge explosion in the background.
Mm. Something
We're
out
only
of a
about
movie.
150 meters away.
Amazing. And then the other thing that you talk about in that chapter is the dumpster diving in the American tip and pulling all this stuff out. It's amazing that yeah, the waste,
Oh, the Americans threw everything out. One of the one squadron patrols were up in Nha Trang somewhere, and the Q store bloke says, "Any of you blokes fly a C-130?" No. Well, there's one out in the strip you can have if you want it. What? So they've got no regard for stuff,
right. Yeah, while you
Just
blokes are
always
scrambling
been
around.
like that. World War Two, World War One.
And there was no drama with wearing the American kit.
Oh no. Oh, everyone else in the task force was spewing, of course.
Right.
But um, I always made a point of when I went down to the what's the shop called?
Which shop?
Where the army shop where you buy stuff.
The 964?
No, that's now.
No.
No,
Oh,
God.
the army disposal,
Yeah, that sort of thing.
the disposal
When
shop.
we went down there to buy stuff, we always made sure we took a style of Sterling or an M4 grease gun,
Right.
stuff that the infantry guys would never have seen.
Right.
It was just shaking.
Yeah. No, fair enough. Yeah, so short chapter, but a good sort of connection to sort of figure out what life is like at Nui Dat, and we're going to get more of that in the next chapter as we talk about settling into a bit of routine, and then finally getting a bit of a holiday, getting off on R&R. So we'll get into
Oh,
that next week. So that is all the time we have this week for Never Die Wondering. Join us next week for the next installment in our exploration of Mick Malone's career as we get to the 19th chapter of the book itself, titled Routine and R&R. If you have a copy of Two Ranks, read along with us. I've been Toby Malone, and thank you to Mick Malone for diligently joining me on this journey.
haven't changed a bit.
This has been Never Die Wondering, Mick Malone in his own words. For links to purchase your own copies of Mick's books, visit the show notes or mickmalone.com.au. This podcast is produced by Toby Malone, Joe Malone and Mick Malone, and engineered by Toby Malone. Theme music is The Happy Wanderer, the official SAS march, as reimagined by Cormac Malone and Meg Logue Malone. Yes, this is a family affair. This is a GM production in association with Imprimatur Books.